Morning. I was thinking lately about something from a Bible study that we held years ago, back long before I was preaching. We were doing the Gospel Project Bible studies, and we were talking about commitment to witnessing and furthering the gospel. And I remember talking about this concept and thinking about it. If I lived in a world where everyone except me was starving and I had an unlimited supply of food and I could go around and give it to everybody I wanted all the time, at what point would I stop going around and giving that out? I'm never going to run out. I'm never going to run out of that stockpile of food, and there's a never-ending supply of people who need it. How committed am I going to be to feeding and feeding and feeding and feeding? And it's kind of the same with the gospel. We've got a world full of people who need Jesus, and we don't run out of God, because God doesn't run out of anything. He's infinite. But sometimes we can put our infinite God's burden on ourselves to the extent where we're overdoing it. We're, like you were kind of saying, we never feel like you're quite doing enough. And I was thinking about that as we were doing our study passages. And it reminded me of this when you had yours from Psalm 46. It says, "Be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted in the earth." Now, that doesn't mean we don't need to do anything. That doesn't mean we don't have any role to play here. We know that we're supposed to share the gospel. We know that we're supposed to work faithfully to serve God. But even if we're still, it's going to happen. I don't need to force God's timing. I don't need to force His plans. I just need to be faithful and diligent. He doesn't say, "I will be exalted among the nations," as long as you burn yourself out making sure it happens. It doesn't say, "I will be exalted in the earth," as long as you always push to do more and never feel like you've accomplished anything. Because that's what we do. We put too much burden on ourselves sometimes. And, over this recent weeks and months, I've been loading up my own plate with a lot of things. A lot of things that have been kind of in the works for a long time, but coming to a head. And it kind of caught up with me during the festival with overdoing it. I got really burnt out, and it put me down pretty hard. But God gave us a gift of rest. And a lot of times we take that for granted, or we overlook it. And I want to talk a little bit about that today. Although we're turning first to Exodus 20, I want to look at another passage real quick. Genesis 2:3 says, "Then God blessed the seventh day and sanctified it, because in it He rested from all His work which God had created and made." God Himself took rest. I am not God, you are not God. If God takes rest, we need to take rest. He didn't take it, though, because He needed it. God never needs rest. He never gets burnt out. He never gets exhausted. He didn't stop and rest on that seventh day because His back was hurting and He was out of breath and tired. It was nothing like that. God doesn't need rest, but we do. But He took rest, and He blessed a day. He sanctified and blessed an entire day. What kinds of things do we ask for blessings for? What kinds of things do people often ask for blessings for? Bless this food, bless me, bless others, bless our efforts. God bless. There's 7 days in a week, and God blessed one out of every one of them. And what do people often do with it? Crash on the couch watching football or NASCAR or something. Go take a nap somewhere. Maybe sleeping off Saturday's hangover. Maybe hitting garage sales. Maybe out shopping all day. It was sanctified and it was set apart. That word sanctified is important because when we are sanctified, we are set apart. Once we're saved, part of that is we're sanctified. We are set apart for God, for a purpose. And through that process of sanctification, we grow in the faith. He gave us a day where we can do that. Now, and as we look at the original, in our passages here in Exodus 20, I want to look at the original commandments of God. The 10 Commandments were given twice in the Old Testament. The first time in Exodus chapter 20, look at verse 8 through 11. This was the first time it was recorded. It says, "Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work. But the seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord your God. In it you shall do no work, you, nor your son, nor your daughter, nor your male servant, nor your female servant, nor your cattle, nor your stranger who is within your gates. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea, and all that is in them, and rested on the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed it. He blessed the Sabbath day, and he hallowed it." When it says he hallowed it, it means that he made it holy. And this is a description of this day to be set apart as a time of remembrance of the work God has done. You know, we do a lot of different things for remembrance. We take communion, the Lord's Supper, in remembrance of the blood that was shed for us and the body that was broken for us. And he's given us a day in remembrance of his work. And maybe part of that is remembrance of his work that he did in creation. Maybe part of that is remembrance of the work that he's done in our lives. Are we reflecting on the way he has blessed us and the way he has changed us and healed us and caused us to grow within him? But then we know that in Deuteronomy chapter 5, let's turn there real quick, the 10 Commandments are gone back over again. In chapter 5, we're going to begin at verse 12, and he's recapping the 10 Commandments, but it's not word for word. There's a little more information here. Chapter 5, verses 12 through 15 says, "Observe the Sabbath day to keep it holy, as the Lord your God commanded you. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord your God. In it you shall do no work, you nor your son, nor your daughter, nor your male servants, nor your female servants, your ox, your donkey, nor any of your cattle, nor any stranger who is within your gates, that your male servant and your female servant may rest as well with you." And listen to this last verse here in 15. "And remember that you were a slave in the land of Egypt, and the Lord your God brought you out from there by a mighty hand and an outstretched arm. Therefore the Lord your God commanded you to keep the Sabbath day." This is a remembrance of the work God has done, as we know, and it's a time of rest, but it's also a time for them. It was a remembrance of the freedom that he gave them from slavery in Egypt. And a lot of times we correlate that with the freedom that we have through Christ from our sin. These people have a lot to celebrate because they were freed from this slavery under Egypt for hundreds and hundreds of years. And they had this day to reflect and to praise God for what he has saved them from. And we do the same thing as we think about the way he saved us from our sins, the way he saved us from slavery to our sins, the way he saved us from a lot of the old ugliness in our lives that he's worked out of us and he's healed within us. Are we taking that time as a remembrance with him? I want to look a little bit more at the purpose. In Exodus chapter 31, verses 16 and 17, it says, "Therefore the children of Israel shall keep the Sabbath to observe the Sabbath throughout their generations as a perpetual covenant. It is a sign between me, God, and the children of Israel forever. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, and on the seventh day he was rested and was refreshed." You know, this is remembrance of God's work as creator. He rested to appreciate the fruit of his labor. I mean, when we're working on something, maybe we're working on things at home throughout the week. Maybe we're working on a project throughout the week. Whenever we accomplish that thing, whenever we finish it, it's usually nice to sit back and admire what's been done. Maybe you've been meaning to paint the garage forever and you finally got it done, and it feels good to sit back and appreciate that great work that's been done. It's a weight off. Maybe you've been meaning to do some deep cleaning in that one bathroom or kitchen in your house, and you finally got that done, and it feels so nice being in there to appreciate the fruits of those labors. And that's what God did, and he's giving us a chance to do the same. Because if we just labor every day, nonstop, how do you really stop and appreciate something that there's never a break from, that constantly feels like it's burning you out? He wants us to have a time to be refreshed. It says he rested and was refreshed. Not rested, and he wasn't refreshed in the sense that he was exhausted and burnt out. And sometimes that can be the case for us. But it's a refreshing time, and it's an uplifting time, and that's what it can be for us. It's not meant to be a burden. It's meant to be a gift. In Deuteronomy 5:15, it says, "And remember that you were a slave in the land of Egypt, and the Lord your God brought you out from there by a mighty hand and an outstretched arm. Therefore, the Lord your God commanded you to keep the Sabbath day." It was a time of remembrance for them, for their freedom, and it's a time of remembrance for us as well, for our salvation. And we have holidays like the 4th of July, and it's a time to reflect and remember our freedom, our independence that people fought for, and it's a time to celebrate that. Something that we just experienced. And do we take that time to think and reflect on what's been done? Often we do. You see people posting American flags and fireworks and things all over Facebook celebrating what's been done. And I think sometimes gradually over time, maybe we get so accustomed to knowing God and perhaps taken for granted that we lose sight of how much he deserves our remembrance and how much he deserves our adoration for the freedom that he has given us, the freedom that he fought for us on the cross. Ezekiel 20 verse 12 says, "Moreover, I gave them my Sabbaths to be a sign between them and me, that they might know that I am the Lord who sanctifies them." It's to know God better and to be more sanctified by him. If I'm spending time dwelling on him, meditating on him, digging into his word, praying to him, thinking about him and the great work he's done, I'm going to know him better than I did yesterday. And I'm going to be more sanctified in him than I was yesterday. And what if I do that every week by week? I'm going to grow stronger in the Lord. There are also some things that are not the purpose of the Sabbath. Actually, let's turn. I'm going to put something on the screen, but if you would turn in your Bibles to Luke chapter 13. Because some people, even today, back then, were going a little overboard with the Sabbath. I'll give you a chance to get there. In Mark chapter 2, verses 27 and 28, it says, "And he said to them," Jesus, "The Sabbath was made for man, and not man for the Sabbath. Therefore the Son of Man is also the Lord of the Sabbath." Now, in Luke chapter 13, sorry, my brain's running on dial-up today, so please bear with me. In Luke chapter 13, it tells a story of some things that happened on the Sabbath that they were getting reprimanded for. Jesus needed to remind people more than once who he was, that he was in control, that he was the Lord over everything, that he was the Lord over the Sabbath itself. And in Luke chapter 13, verses 10 through 17, it says, "Now he was teaching in one of the synagogues on the Sabbath, and behold, there was a woman who had a spirit of infirmity 18 years, and was bent over, and could in no way raise herself up. But when Jesus saw her, he called her to him and said to her, 'Woman, you are loosed from your infirmity.' And he laid his hands on her, and immediately She was made straight and glorified God. Man, that was some laborious work, wasn't it? He went out and he was just laboring away for hours for that. Look how simple that was. Simple for him. He laid hands and freed her and healed her, and that was it. Verse 14, but the ruler of the synagogue answered with indignation because Jesus had healed on the Sabbath. And he said to the crowd, there are 6 days in which men ought to work. Therefore come and be healed on them and not on the Sabbath day. And then the Lord answered to him and said, hypocrite, does not each one of you on the Sabbath loose his ox or his donkey from the stall and lead it away to water it? So ought not this woman, being a daughter of Abraham, whom Satan has bound, think of it, for 18 years, be loosed from this bond on the Sabbath? And when he said these things, all his adversaries were put to shame, and the multitude rejoiced for all the glorious things that were done by him. They were being so ridiculously overboard, and as we know, they were constantly trying to trip Jesus up into something, or to accuse him of something, or make him look bad in the public eye to justify what they wanted to do to him. And he freed a woman from a debilitating impairment that Jesus said was caused by Satan himself, by the power of God. And these synagogue leaders were reprimanding him for that. They're supposed to be God's leaders. How insane does that sound if a pastor was chastising you for praying? That's about how ridiculous that sounds. And the point of this is, it's not meant as a restriction. The Sabbath is not meant to be shackles for people. It's a gift. And, I've been asked so many times, and I see people asking on Facebook different times, is it okay if I do this on a Sunday? Is it okay if this happens on a Sunday? Well, what if I have a job and they're forcing me to work on Sunday? Is God going to be mad at me for that? And first off, biblically, the Sabbath is Saturday. Sunday is the first day biblically, and the seventh is Saturday. We celebrate the Lord's Day on Sunday because that was the day Jesus resurrected, and the day that the early church in Acts celebrated Jesus. But there can still be a rest. There can still be a time of rest. I know, in this day and age, employers don't care what you have going on. You're working this day or you don't have a job. There's a lot of their mindsets. But we can still take a time of rest. Maybe Monday's your day off. Maybe Wednesday's your day off. Do you take the time to refresh? Do you take the time to be renewed? Do you take the time to dwell on the Lord? And sometimes we need to make ourselves do that. We think we can do it all, and we can just keep going and going and going, but God himself takes a rest. God himself tells us to take a rest. Take a rest. Looking back at that illustration that I was thinking about of having all the food in the world and being able to give it out as long as I want until I quit. Somebody could choose to do that nonstop for a week till they burn themselves out and kick over dead. Or they can do so much a day, go to bed and rest, get up refreshed. Do so much a day, go to bed and rest, get up refreshed. Take a break one day, come back refreshed. And maybe they can do that for years and be useful to hundreds of times more people. It's kind of like when you're on the airplane and those oxygen masks drop. You're supposed to put your own on before you put them on the kids, because if you're not taking care of yourself, you can't take care of anybody else. And Colossians chapter 2, verses 16 and 17. It says, let no one judge you in food or in drink, regarding a festival or a new moon or Sabbaths, which are a shadow of things to come, but the substance is of Christ. In today's world, everybody's lives, well, so many people's lives are just so fast-paced. There's just so much chaos to our schedules. A lot of times they're overburdened. Sometimes that's by the boss. Sometimes that's by our own hand. Sometimes it's by the people around us who pile on things. Sometimes it could be a million different things. Maybe we put things off and now it's all coming back on us. But for whatever reason, a lot of people are lucky to have just a few hours a week to settle down and relax. Lucky to have just some time to catch their breath and clear up, clear their mind. But could that change? You know, is there another way that we could be doing things? Was there another way? You know, has it always been like this? Has it always been to where both people in a household or in a marriage or multiple people in a household have to work 1-2 jobs all combined just to keep things going? It didn't used to be like that. You know, 50, 75 years ago, one average job could cover everything everybody needed in the family. I just read a thing where, I forget what decade it was, it might have been like the early 70s or something like that. They said that if you worked a minimum wage job throughout the summer, it would be enough to cover your college tuition for the rest of the year.
So true. So true.
And, you know, it's gotten to a point where, for whatever reason, everybody's got to work themselves to death just to keep things going, for a lot of reasons. You know, I'm not going to read the whole passage, but you know, in Exodus chapter 5 and 6, we see where Moses came to Pharaoh and said that, hey, I want you to let my people, we want to go out to the wilderness and we want to worship God. And he said, you know what, these people have too much time on their hands. Make their job harder. Just to paraphrase. He said, make them do twice as much work. Make them make twice as many bricks. Make them gather their own materials to make the bricks instead of bringing it to them. Obviously, they're not completely wiped out in their time and their energy. So let's pile more on them to make free time, to make worship time more difficult. And you know, like Solomon said, there's nothing new under the sun. And like Paul told the Corinthians, there's no temptation except that which is common to man. You know, the enemy has the same playbook he's always had. In one way or another, he's going to find a way to steal our time, to steal our focus, to steal our energy, to steal our motivation, our hope. And think about what the Pharaoh did, and think about the difference in what it takes income-wise in this world. You know, the way things have gone, you've seen inflation go up, 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 up. You might get a 3% raise next year, but inflation might go up 20% next year. You make a little more, but things still cost you a little more than that, and it climbs and climbs and climbs. Prices have gone up. Our dollar's worth less. And on top of that, we're constantly conditioned to feel like we need so many things that we don't need. We constantly have commercials on our faces slapping us with things that we can't live without, supposedly. And what happens? Luxury things. Things that don't have real value, things that don't have real substance, but many people feel that they can't live without. And so what happens is people want more stuff, so they sacrifice more time so they can work more, so they can make more, so they can buy more, just to keep up with all this stuff. We want more, so we spend more. And then when we spend more, we owe more. And then when we owe more, we have to work more. And when we work more, we rest less. We can't even enjoy those things that we needed so badly. That was one thing I liked about when I always hated it when I'd work constant overtime at a factory. You know, every now and then you're like, oh yeah, we're on 7/12s, and it's been that way for a few months. It'd wear you out, but man, you'd bank up some good money because you didn't ever have time to spend it. You didn't have time to go do anything. You didn't have time to go shopping. Maybe you spent a little more on fast food because you didn't have time to cook. But you bank it up. But it strips our time, and it strips our energy, and it strips our rest. And when you think about how important rest is, how important sleep is, I'm sure at some point you've probably seen a movie where somebody was taken prisoner, maybe in like a war situation or something like that. And sometimes they would, see them torture them by depriving them of sleep. Maybe they're trying to get information out of this person. And one of their tactics is keep them awake, keep them awake, keep them awake. Because what happens is it weakens them. It weakens their mind. It weakens their determination. It's been used for interrogation. I looked up some stats on it. It says that after 24 hours, people suffer huge drops in cognitive function. So your brains aren't processing as much. You can tell mine's running a little slow right now. It runs a lot slower in situations like that. People suffer huge drops in cognitive function, drops in memory, drops in coherent speech. They make less sense when they're talking. Social competence. Eventually, it says, victims will suffer from hallucinations and a total break from reality. And, sleep deficiency is linked to a lot of different chronic health problems: heart disease, kidney disease, high blood pressure, diabetes, stroke, obesity, depression. When we don't give our body a chance to rest, a chance to heal, a chance to catch up with us, everything else starts to catch up with us. And gradually, it can wear us down. What if instead of, we've seen how Satan works. He usually does things gradually. Temptation grows gradually. Sin and immorality grow gradually. We've talked before about, how much is allowed on things like television and movies, how it used to be so much more censored. And bit by bit, the worst things just inch their foot in the door. Maybe this, there was a certain point when you couldn't use words that weren't even swear words. You couldn't show an image of a toilet on a TV show. There was different things like that were censored. And bit by bit, let's inch our way in a little more, a little more, a little more. And when people complain about it, they'll stop for a while, but hold there, and then they'll go a little more and a little more. Because it just happened all at once. Imagine going from how censored things used to be to the very next day being like they are now. It would not be accepted at all. It would have been stopped. And that's the thing. That's how Satan works. He likes to inch his way into things because it doesn't look as aggressive and it's not as easily noticeable and it's less likely to be stopped. So what if instead of doing like these interrogators would do, and what if instead of just keeping us up for 2, 3, 4, 5 days straight, what if he started robbing us of our rest bit by bit? What if he took 5 minutes here? What if he took a little time over here? And what if he tricked us into adding a little more on our plate right here and a little more over here, and to the point where life is just constant chaos, constantly being stripped and diminished of our rest. And gradually after doing that, it's going to weaken our minds, it's going to weaken our focus, it's going to weaken our memory. God said it's supposed to be a day of remembrance. It's going to weaken our patience, it's going to weaken our judgment, it's going to weaken our temperament. It's going to weaken and damage our bodies. It can cause depression, anxiety, and eventually a sense of hopelessness. You think, what's a few more hours of time here and there? What's a few more hobbies? What's just a little bit more debt? Oh, this is 6 months savings cash. I can pay it off in no time. How many times when you were probably younger did you say, "Ooh, I'm going to do this. I'll just pay it off with my tax refund"? And then, but that fly doesn't like what I got to say. We always have grand plans for that tax refund, but it's usually eaten up by other things, and that doesn't end up happening. We think, I can work that off in no time. What could it hurt? What could just this little bit more hurt? And it's just chipping away at our resources, at our energy. We need to take it back. Satan is trying to steal our rest. He's trying to steal this Sabbath rest. We need to take it back from him. We are to be conformed to the image of Christ. And if we understand what that means, it's not just faithfulness. It's not just obedience. It's not just trying to be kind of like him. Look at how he lived. Look at his example. This is the guy who said, My yoke is easy and my burden is light. How often do you see Jesus panicked anywhere? He is cool and calm and moves steadily, but he got the job done. He heard Lazarus was dying and he needed to come heal him. He stayed right where he was for 2 days. And then he went. He didn't panic. He didn't rush. He was at peace. He was at rest. When he went to go heal Jairus' daughter, he was stopped so he could heal someone else. God's will was still done, and it didn't depend on the frantic rushing of a human being. God's will is going to be accomplished regardless of how much or little we think we need to push ourselves. Are there things that we could be pruning? Are there things that we look at and just say, this is sucking the energy out of me, this is sucking my time away, this is sucking away my finances, so I'm having to work extra? The Sabbath wasn't meant to be a burden. It wasn't meant to be some harsh restriction. It was meant to be a gift that restored us, rejuvenated us, renewed us, and pulled us closer and closer to God. So we need to start taking that back. We need to take back our time, our energy. We need to take back our Sabbath. We need to take back our rest. We need to take back God's gift of rest. And as that's a gift from him, we need to honor him with it. We need to focus on him throughout. Do that and watch your life start changing. Watch your heart start changing. Watch your mind and your peace start changing in ways that we can't force. When we stop and rest, when we pull back and we allow God to work, and we stop trying to force his hand and force his timing, the God who can't be stopped he's gonna accomplish things that we never could. We just need to trust in that fully.